berhenti pada percaya. Mana saya mengerti sehingga saya percaya. Relasi antara ya tidak untuk dipertentangkan, ya tidak untuk diperdebatkan, tetapi bagaimana keduanya saling melengkapi. Maka demikian juga ketika kita masuk pada persoalan-persoalan kita terhadap Tuhan, apa penyebabnya, sehingga kita teliti atau kita introspeksi dulu apa yang menyebabkan kita saling melengkapi ya antara pendekatan teologis, filosofis, antara akal dengan doktrin agama. Mungkin itu Mas atau Pak siapa tadi sudah hilang ya ini ya. Oke. Ya. Saya kembalikan kepada moderator. Ini ada lagi.
Baik, terima kasih Bu Dr. Ulya atas tanggapannya. Ini masih ada satu pertanyaan lagi dari dosen Ushuluddin, dosen Bu Anissa Listiana. Ini ada satu pertanyaan dari Bu Anissa Listiana kepada Bu Dr. Ulya berkaitan dengan humanisme progresif yang dihubungkan dengan konsep religiositas untuk memajukan peradaban melalui semangat kebangsaan dan menghargai keragaman dalam suatu bangsa atau antar bangsa. Ini Bu Ulya, satu pertanyaan dari Bu Anissa.
Terima kasih Bu Anissa ya, pertanyaan yang juga bagus sekali ini ya. Jadi bagaimana tentang humanisme progresif yang dihubungkan dengan konsep religiositas untuk memajukan peradaban melalui semangat kebangsaan dan menghargai keragaman ya dalam suatu bangsa atau antar bangsa ya. Jadi kalau kita menengok tentang konsep religiositas ya dalam konteks yang lebih sempit ya, baik itu maaf ya, bisa saya ulangi. Ya, saya ulangi Bu Anissa. Jadi kembali kepada awal ya, bahwa tidak ada sesungguhnya konsep religiositas ya, baik dalam Islam maupun dalam agama-agama secara universal yang sifatnya mencoba untuk atau yang sifatnya tidak pada penghargaan antar sesama. Jadi sesungguhnya semua agama ini memiliki kesamaan bahwa agama itu diturunkan untuk meningkatkan harkat dan martabat manusia, baik itu laki-laki maupun perempuan, ya, baik itu yang ada di Indonesia maupun yang ada di luar Indonesia, apapun sukunya, apapun ada ya salah satu ayat yang menyatakan ya bahwa Tuhan ya Allah menciptakan bangsa, menciptakan manusia ini dalam kelompok-kelompok bangsa yang bermacam-macam ya, yang tujuannya adalah untuk saling mengenal. Nah, sesungguhnya yang demikian pula yang terjadi pada agama-agama yang lain gitu. Maka ketika yang demikian itu sebetulnya sama persis dengan apa yang disebut dengan ideologi tujuan ya dari ideologi humanisme peradaban, humanisme progresif, maaf ya. Jadi kalau saya menyatakan bahwa sesungguhnya humanisme progresif dengan konsep religiositas Islam maupun konsep religiositas universal sesungguhnya tidak ada pertentangan di dalamnya, yang sesungguhnya sama-sama mencoba untuk meningkatkan harkat dan martabat manusia, tidak saling melakukan ya konflik ataupun peperangan dan seterusnya, tapi bagaimana kita diajak bisa hidup damai, rukun, dan memanusiakan manusia. Begitu Bu Anissa. Saya kembalikan ke moderator kembali.
Baik, terima kasih kepada Dr. Ulya untuk respon dan yang telah diberikan. Begitu Bu Anissa Listiana. Jadi apabila Ibu Bapak masih punya beberapa pertanyaan atau ide, nanti bisa langsung dituliskan di kolom komentar atau chat box. Nah, setelah ini kita akan langsung mendengarkan bersama-sama paparan yang akan disampaikan oleh Profesor Franz Wijsen, ya. Beliau dari Radboud University, Belanda. Jadi saya akan menyapa beliau terlebih dahulu. Okay, thank you very much for Dr. Ulya. What an amazing presentation. And for all participants, just write down your ideas or your question in the chat box. We will open the next Q&A after Professor Franz Wijsen presentation. So I will greet Professor Wijsen, Prof. Franz. Hello, Prof. Franz Wijsen.
Yeah, I'm here.
Yes.
Do you hear me?
Yeah, we can clearly hear you. Kita sudah tersambung ya. Now, ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome our third presenter from Professor Franz Wijsen. He is from Radboud University, the Netherlands. He will deliver a presentation entitled brief information about Professor Franz that I note from Radboud University website. He is a professor of empirical and practical religious studies, and he is a chair of practical religious studies or mission studies. He conducted a research project in Tanzania, Indonesia, and also on the Netherlands. His recent project in Indonesia is eco-theology and ecofeminism in Indonesia. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Professor Franz. And Professor, the floor is yours.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
It is a pleasure and an honor to share with you some ideas about the topic of today of your conference, religiosity and humanity. And I thank the Dean Pak Masuk share with you some ideas about this important topic. Well, honestly, I was a bit puzzled by the topic religiosity, and these two words are broad concepts, and their meanings are not very precise. So what exactly do we mean by religiosity? What exactly do we mean by humanity? So it was really a puzzle for me to present something today. But I thought, well, maybe let me relate it to a topic that I'm familiar with, namely the religion and ecology debate in Indonesia. So when I speak about religiosity, let me just define it as a belief in God or belief in a supreme being. I think that is a more or less accepted definition of religion. But when we speak about humanity, then it becomes a bit complicated, because also the topic or the concept of humanity can have many meanings. For example, human race or humankind, or human nature, or the quality of being human. And well, that is the meaning that I will take in this presentation. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to explore some ideas about belief in God, focused on the relationship between humans and nature. So that is the perspective that I'm talking from. And what I'm going to tell is in fact based on ongoing PhD research. One of your lecturers, Zaimatus, is one of the PhD candidates who is involved in this project on ecology, eco-Islam in Indonesia. I have 8 points. I had a PowerPoint. I'm not sure if it is available for you. If not, I just will present my 8 points. And I have a question or a topic for debate at the very end. Now, my first point. In 1967, the historian Lynn White, a professor at Princeton University, wrote a very interesting article on the historical roots of our ecological crisis. That was in 1967. And White pointed at the monotheistic religions being the main root of our ecological problem. Basically, he referred to the Judaic Christian religion, referring to the creation story. For those of you who are familiar with the Christian or the Judaic creation story, Genesis chapter 1, verse 18, have dominion over the fish of the sea, the birds of the air, and all the living things that move on the earth. So clearly the image of humanity, the image of a human being as the image of God, is the dominion over nature. But I think the same applies to the Quran, Al-Quran, verse chapter 2:30, where it is speaking about the Caliphate, as we all know in the debate. Well, more or less the same applies to that notion. If you see how it is translated, it is very ambiguous. It could be ruler, it could be successor, it could be steward, it could be guide. So a very broad, ambiguous notion. So my first point is that in the debate from the 1960s onwards, there has been an idea that the monotheistic religions, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, are the main root of our ecological problem in this world. My second point, there were immediately very strong reactions, both from the Christian scholars as Muslim scholars. From the Muslim side, mainly Sayyid Hussein Nasser, who argued that white was prejudiced, one-sided, and he put forward the notion that from the Muslim thinking, there is no human supremacy, there is no human dominion in creation, because in God's creation, all creatures are equal. So humans and nature are equal, are on equal footing in creation, and they are God's creation. So there is not a supremacy of one above the other. But I think that we do have a problem here. Humans and nature are indeed equal to a certain extent, but they are not the same. And in our research on faith-based visions of humans and nature, we try to explore more on what humans stand for, what the label humans stand for. And later on, I will give an example that is quite ambiguous. What exactly the vision of humans is in this debate. So there is a claim that monotheistic religions are the root cause of our ecological problem. There are reactions, strong reactions against that, both from Muslim perspective and Christian perspective. And I go further with an overview of some ideas in history that might explain the huge diversity of notions of humanity. When I look in the Western tradition, of course, the biblical image of humans as dominators of nature culminated in the Enlightenment idea with philosophers such as René Descartes. Now, as those of you who are familiar with philosophy know that Descartes made a distinction between I as thinking, I as consciousness versus the body. And from that moment onwards, there was a clear dualism between, let's say, the spiritual world and the material world. And this led to a great scientific and technological innovation based on rationalism, based on the Cartesian view of the human being. In the short definition, cogito ergo sum. I think, thus I am. Now, this rational worldview or scientific worldview was already there in the Muslim world. It is not a Western invention. In fact, the Western world came late. Oh, there it is. There is my presentation. Next sheet, please. Next sheet, yeah. So I'm now at the third point. I explained a little bit about René Descartes and his separation between I as thinking and the body, representing the scientific, rationalistic world. But this worldview was already present in the Muslim world in philosophers such as Ibn Sina, Al-Ghazali, Ibn Rushdi. So this rational way of looking, and maybe you can say scientific way of looking, was already present in the Muslim world long before it was present. It came to the Western world. But of course, people in the West felt uncomfortable with this distinction within the vision of human, between the thinking, the I as thinking and I as the body. And now I move to the fourth point. The Cartesian image of humans is criticized by William James and George Herbert Mead's notion of the extended self. The other is part of me. Now, William James was one of the first philosophers in the West who criticized the distinction between self and body. And he made a distinction between I and me. I is the knowing subject, or I as the knower, and me, according to this definition, is the self as known. So the self, in James' perspective, is composed of everything that people can know about me. My body, my clothes, my house, my wife, my husband, my children, they are all part of me. And they are felt to be mine. So there was an attempt to overcome or to go beyond the dualism between self and body, saying that the other visions are already part of me. In the same vein, George Herbert Mead introduced the idea of the generalized other. So not only taking the role of the other, my mother, my father, my imam or whoever, my president, but that the others, as generalized others, are already part of myself. And this led to a more dialogical or relational image of the human being. So the human being is not separated from the world. The human being is not opposed to the world, but the human being is part of the world, and there is a dialogical relation between me, the self, and the world. Now, if we go further than that, now I come to my fifth point, we can extend to the other being the nature. That could mean that we do not only relate to nature, but that nature is part of us. Or the reverse, that we are part of nature. And we have many examples from that in our traditions. For example, in the Christian tradition, Francis of Assisi, in his Canticle of the Sun, prayed to brother sun, sister moon, brothers wind and earth, sister water, sister mother earth. And that he was really united with nature. He saw the manifestations in nature to be his family. And so he was part of that. He considered himself to be part of that family. But also in Islam, of course, we have the tradition of eco-Sufism, people who see themselves as united with nature. So the human being not above nature, but part of nature. And one can say, well, that is a romantic critique of modern technology, but it was more a critique on scientism, not so much on science. I come back to that later. Now, what we do in our research, so what I did so far is I tried to describe some images of humanity, images of what it means to be human in relation to nature from a religious or faith perspective. So what we do in our present research is we explore faith-based visions of human nature interaction. We have a questionnaire, and we distributed that questionnaire in 10 locations in Indonesia, with about 100 interviewees in all the locations. So we will have more than 1,000 respondents. And we look at them from 4 perspectives, 4 images of God, 4 images of the humans being a master, humans being the master of nature, a ruler of nature, humans being the steward, al-Khalifa, humans being partner of nation, so in a dialogical relation, humans and nature are on equal footing and they somehow dialogue or relate to each others, or human beings as participant in nature. So humans are not above nature, or they don't dialogue with nature because they are part of nature. So what we are trying to investigate in Indonesia is whether certain images of God relate to visions of human and nature interaction, but also to practices of destroying nature, or guarding nature, or protecting nature. So that is what we are going to do in our research. Coming back to the point that I started with in the beginning, the term al-Khalifa is a bit ambiguous. Because it is used in quite different ways. It could mean ruler, it could mean steward, it could mean guard. And to show the ambiguity, I have a text of one of our interviewees. Please go to the next slide. Can you go to the next slide? Yeah. So I just give you a text from one of our interviewees, showing that it is quite complex how humans are conceived in relation to nature. So one of our interviewees said this: nature is God's creation. Because nature is God's creation, everything in nature has the same function, status, and responsibility. And so everything in nature has the same function, status, and responsibility. But in carrying out its function, each type of creation is different. So you get the impression humans and nature are on equal footing, but they are also different. And later on in the text, the yellow marked, the person said, so that because the status and function is different, but the relation must be the same. There must be appreciation and respect between one creature and another, especially because humans are created as stewards, as leaders. Now, that is the ambiguity that I'm talking about. Are we on equal footing as human beings? Or are we stewards, leaders, God? So we are above nature. So there is a dilemma, there is a struggle in the text. It does not mean that humans treat nature as they want. No, but he must be full of responsibility according to his nature as a creature. He must respect nature, he must preserve creature, even though it can be used. Well, this is just one example. We have quite some interviews, and in all the interviews, we see this struggle between al-Khalifa, human as al-Khalifa, meaning the steward or ruler. So had the image that that human beings are above nature, they protect nature. But on the other hand, seeing the human being as equal to nature, so more participant in nature. or even people would say people are partner or they are embedded in nature. As one of the other interviewees said, nature can do without human beings, but human beings cannot do without nature. I come to my last point in the presentation, and that is also my question for the debate. Go back to the previous slide, please. So when we are talking about religiosity and humanity, if we talk about belief in God and images of what we are as human beings, we are faced with a dilemma, I think. In the environmental debate, it is the dilemma between environmentalism, going back to nature, protecting nature, guardian nature, or eco-modernity, belief in technology, belief in science, as I referred to in the beginning, referring to the Muslim tradition, scientific worldview. So working with nature from our own gifts as rational being. So a dilemma between environmentalism and eco-modernity, between going back to the past. So when you say, well, we have to preserve nature, we guard nature, the images, you go back to nature as it was in the past, or move further to green technology or clean technology. There is a dilemma between more or less market, more or less technology. Some people say, well, we have to do away with the market, we have to do away with businesses, we have to do away with industries because industry only exploits nature. Or do you believe in a clean or green industry that makes nature better? So there is an ambiguity here. And basically, I would say the basic question for today, when we talk about religiosity and humanity, do we have an optimistic view of humanity, or do we have a pessimistic view of humanity? Well, basically, I would like to leave it like that. What I try to do, I address the topic religion and humanity from my perspective of the ecology debate, and I tried to clarify some notions of humanity, of what a human being is in relation to nature, and from a religious perspective, exploring what humans' position in nature is, but also what humans' task in relation to nature is. So I leave it at that, and I thank you for your attention. And I give the floor back to the chairperson.
Thank you very much for the presentation, Prof. Frans. And well, ladies and gentlemen, now we come to the question and answer. Yeah, there will be 2 sessions, and each session is for 3 questions. Please mention your name and state to which presenter you address your question. If you have any further question, you can also push the raise hand button, and the host will be let you in. Jadi Ibu Bapak, apabila ada pertanyaan, silahkan dituliskan di kolom komentar, dan apabila Anda ingin bertanya secara langsung, Anda bisa menekan tombol raise hand.
So do you want me to address the questions?
Yes, this is one question from Ahmad Syabuddin. Good afternoon.
So the question, thank you for the amazing presentation. Here I would to ask you, how do you explain to someone who hasn't got religion to understand these three concepts: God, humans, and nature? Well, let me give a background of the research that we are doing. This research was started in the northern Europe because of the pollution that we had with the River Rhine. Now, as you know, the Western Europe is considered to be territory where people don't believe in God, where people are secular. So we were very, very interested to see how people would react to the scale. And surprisingly, what we found massively is that people in the West would not refer to God or would not refer to transcendence, but most of the interviewees, they spoke in terms of spiritual values, saying that there is much more than the material world. So they refer to kind of a spiritual world that goes beyond the material world. It was surprising, and I'm not sure whether you can call that God, but it was very surprising that even among very secular people who claim that they don't have a religion, or at least people who don't, who are not affiliated to a religious institution, yet they spoke in terms of spiritual values. So in the West, we would say that there is believing without belonging and belonging without believing. That is a famous expression in the sociology of religion. So you can have people who belong to a religious institution but don't believe. And you can have people who don't belong to a religious institution, but we do believe. And what we thought in our, what we found in our research is that even people who claim that they are not religious or they don't believe in God, yet they do have or they do believe in a spiritual world that goes beyond the material world. So once again, I'm not sure if you call that a belief in God, but to us that was quite surprising that so many people referred to a spiritual world beyond the material world. So I hope that I addressed that question. There is another question. All religion has.
Maybe we will give opportunity to Miss Mundi Rahayu.
Okay, yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Professor Franz. Here is afternoon.
For me this morning.
Yeah. You are in the early morning. So thank you very much for your presentation. I think that's a very thoughtful ideas talking about the environmentalism and eco-modernity. So in your explanation just now, you make these 2 points opposite each other: environmentalism versus eco-modernity. So I didn't get the ideas why these two ideas opposite each other. In my mind, both of them defend the nature. Both of them fight for the environment. Is it because of the technological determinant that make it different? So I would like to get a further explanation from Mr. Professor Franz Wijsen. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you very much for this interesting and relevant question. I did not mean to create a dichotomy between the two. I simply tried to describe trends that I see in the literature and also in the environmental debate. So there are some people who argue that we have to go back to nature, and nature as it used to be in the past, and they tend to be very critical about technology and about market and about business. And so the small is beautiful idea that we don't need more technology, more market, but less market, less technology. So I would say that there's a more romantic idea of going back to pure nature as it was in the past. The other trend, is the more scientific, more technological view, believing that we don't need less technology, but more technology, better technology. So that there are, at least what I see in the literature, at least two trends. Basically, I agree with you that they don't need to be in opposition to each other, because both I would say have the same goal, namely to make nature and environment better. But the ways they do that seem to go in quite different direction. And so far, I don't see a mediation between the two, or a middle path between the two trends.
Okay. Okay, so what is the debate that is now nowadays sparking in maybe Western intellectuals dealing with nature and human being? So which position that is now people or intellectuals fight for?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure if there is a favorite position between the two, because I see among the environmentalists there is this idea that we don't need economic growth, we don't need technological innovations. The trend of going back to as it was in the past. The others had the more technological view. I'm not sure if there is one dominant position. At least I don't see it yet in the debate. But in the project that I'm talking about, there is a strong idea that in working for a better environment, we cannot do without technology. We cannot do without business. And we also clearly see that more and more businesses are interested in producing a clean and green technology. So they are really committed to improving environment, and they have reasons to do so. By the way, I do see the same happening in Indonesia, although it is still very small. As you know, within the European Union, we claim to be in nature-friendly continent by the year 2050. That means all the industries, all the businesses, they really go for that. So business people, they very well know that if they do an investment now, if they want to sell their products, they must be produced in an eco-friendly way. So that's why you see a trend that they invest in clean and green technologies more and more. Maybe not enough.
Okay.
I think that is yet to come in Indonesia, but I see in the debate really a position that we cannot solve ecological problems without technology, without business, without the civil society groups, among them faith-based organizations. For example, in Indonesia, of course, as all of you know, NU plays a major role, and Muhammadiyah has an important role. So faith-based, the engagement of faith-based communities is very important in this debate, but not without business and technology, and of course the government. I'm not sure if I make myself clear. So I don't see in Europe at the moment a dominant position, but I do see that there is a debate going on between various groups, civil society groups, universities.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much for Ms. Mundi Rahayu. So let's, Prof, there's one question from AV5 on the chat box. There are one question left from AV5. All of religion has learned, the peace point and the beautiful nature is image of good human. So what do you think the illegal lodging and human trafficking, are they God's will or human carelessness? Yeah, that's the question.
Let me just read carefully. All of religions has learned the peace point and beautiful nature and image of God's human. So what do you think the illegal logging and human trafficking? Are they God's will? Are human careless? Well, basically, I would argue that let me first a question about the peace. One of the interviewees that we spoke with, he referred to the peace within the self. So he referred to the spirituality or mysticism, peace with the self, peace with other human beings, and peace with the whole world. So 3 levels of peace. Peace within the world cannot go without peace between all human beings, but moreover, it cannot go without peace within the self. Peace within the self. I found that a very interesting observation. So going back to the question about illegal logging and human trafficking, I would think that human trafficking has nothing to do with equality between human beings. That is exploitation of human beings. So I don't think that human trafficking can be related to human will in any way. But that's my understanding. I hope that I understand the question correctly. So what do you think the illegal logging and human trafficking, are they God's will? My answer would be no, because then you don't see all creatures as equal, having the equal rights. And because one person exploits the other person. There is one person who wants to address me. Mundi Rahayu from UIN Malang.
Okay.
Oh, that's you. Okay, sorry. Okay.
Yeah.
First semester, current phenomenon is that there are still many people who. Okay. Now the last question is. So the current phenomenon is that there are still many people who litter factory waste that reaches community villages, even though they know it's wrong, and they also perform religious rituals. Can such a thing be said to be a religious person? Well, the question whether a person is religious, that is a difficult question, and it's for me very difficult to evaluate how do you measure or define what a religious person is. But let me first give the background of our research. We started research 10 years ago in Bandung with ITB Bandung on Citarum River, the pollution of Citarum River. And we had a project there involving eight PhD students working on the Citarum River, so economists, medical doctors, lawyers, anthropologists, and there was one scholar of religion who will defend her PhD by the end of this year. And the topic of her research was purification in Islamic thought and the pollution of Citarum River. And what we try to do is how come that people who are concerned about purity, I mean, the essence of Islam is purity, purification. How come that they pollute water? 60% of the pollution in Citarum River is household based. So it is not the industry, textile industry, but it is simply people like you and me throwing garbage and so on in the river. So we asked ourselves, how come that people who believe in purity and people who say that purity is a part of belief or part of worship, as we saw in many eco-pesantren, still throw garbage or pollute rivers. And moreover, as you all know, there are fatwas within NU that clearly are against the misusing plastic and throwing away plastic, but still people do so. One interesting finding in this research was that, and by the way, I go back to a previous point about belief in God. Belief in God in for example, in the West, the secularization. One of the statements of this student was that Indonesia is more secularized than the West. We very often speak about the secularized West. But she claimed that Indonesia is more secularized than the West. And what she wanted to say is that there was a clear separation, what she found, between the spiritual world, between mosques, between pesantren, and the material world. Saying that when we interviewed people, they say, yeah, when we go to the mosque, we pray to God. We are referring to the other world, the spiritual world. But the garbage in the river, that is the responsibility of the government. So a very clear separation between what is religious responsibility or what is the religious task of Kiai or pesantren, and the waste management being a task of the government. Summarizing, I do see that there is a gap between a practice, the practice, the factual practice, and the religious belief. It has something to do with a separation between the spiritual and the material world, or this world and the hereafter world. But happily, I also see many trends in Indonesia to bridge that gap. For example, in eco-pesantren, in eco-Islam, so that you really try to develop models of waste and water management from a religious point of view. But the question, can such a thing be said to be a religious person? That is a very broad question, and that would need a very clear definition of religion. And I'm afraid that I can't answer that question directly. That was my response to Laila Norinda.
Okay, thank you so much, Professor Frans. So we come to the end of the session, but before that, I will try to say hello to Bu Zaimah. Assalamualaikum, Bu Zaim. Assalamualaikum.
Ya, waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
How's life? we miss you so much.
Thank you. Yeah.
So please give a word for our audience.
Yeah. Thank you, Professor Franz Wijsen, for your time and opportunity to give a talk in this webinar in our campus. It is really an honor for us to invite you in this webinar. It is really that what you present in our webinar is very interesting materials, religion and ecology. We see humanity and religiosity in the perspective of religion and ecology. This is an important thing because we know that environmental crisis is become a global crisis, not the problem of Muslim, of Christian, not the problem of religion, but it is problem of humanity, and religion should take a part in facing this problem. Yeah, we really hope that educational institution like IAIN Kudus can play a part and in giving deeper understanding and bridging the gap between the problem, ecological crisis or environmental crisis, and religious understanding. Because what you said before, that people that don't believe in religion, that they believe in spiritual being, and we are Muslim or Christian, we believe in religion, but sometimes we are become very secular, that we put something that relate to religion in one side and put the problem of ecological crisis in other side, and we cannot put them together. Like what you explained us, that people in river, in Citarum River, for example, they perceive that water is very important for ablution, for wudu, but still they litter and throw the garbage in water or in the river. So there is two phenomena that very paradoxal. Yeah. Thank you very much again, Pak Frans.
Okay, yeah. Welcome.
Yeah.
And I wish you a good seminar.
Yeah, very interesting. Yeah. And the participant also more than 100. Really interesting.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Ms. Zaim. Saya informasikan kepada seluruh peserta dan adik-adik mahasiswa bahwa Bu Zaimah ini merupakan salah satu dosen IAIN Kudus yang sekarang tugas belajar di Belanda, dan beliau di bawah bimbingan Prof Franz juga yang melakukan penelitian tentang ekoteologi gitu ya. Jadi mudah-mudahan ini bisa menjadi inspirasi bagi adik-adik mahasiswa semuanya dan tentu saja untuk lebih memajukan kampus kita bersama. Ya. Amin. Okay, we come to the end of this event. So before we close the event, applause, yeah.
Good.
Yes. Okay. Before we close the events, let's take a photo together. Our host, our operator, will capturing the monitor, yeah, capturing the video. So please turn on your videos. Yeah.
Yeah, let's take a photo.
Yeah, let's take a photo together. Turn on your videos.
Okay, everybody, I will take your pictures, and I don't know which page there are. You are. There are 4 pages, yeah. Okay. Okay, for the first page, 1, 2, 3. Keep smiling until the end, yeah, because I don't know which page is in your place, yeah. Okay, the second page. Okay, the second page. 1, 2, 3. Okay, for the third pages. 1, 2, 3. Okay, for the last page, 1, 2, 3. Okay, thank you everyone. You can turn off your video if you want, but if you still want to on your video, please. Yes.
Okay, thank you so much for everyone. Thank you so much for all of participants. Before we close this event, we will pray together. Please come into Mr. Wijsen, Bapak Afif.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين حمدا يوافي نعمه ويكافئ مزيدا. يا ربنا لك الحمد كما ينبغي لجلال وجهك وعظيم سلطانك. سبحانك لا نحصي ثناء عليك كما أثنيت على نفسك. اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد في الآخرين وصل وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد في النبيين وصل وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد في الملأ الأعلى إلى يوم الدين. يا الله يا قاضي الحاجات، يا غافر الذنوب والخطيئات، يا دافع السيئات، يا كافي المهمات، اكفنا ما أهمنا برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. اللهم ارزقنا حمدا ومجدا. اللهم إنا نسألك بجاه نبيك الكريم وبحرمة القرآن العظيم أن تغص علينا وعلى أولادنا وأحبابنا وأصحابنا وتلاميذنا ومن أوصانا بالدعاء. اللهم ارزقنا علما نافعا وعملا متقبلا ورزقا واسعا حلالا طيبا. اللهم انفعنا بما علمتنا وعلمنا ما ينفعنا. اللهم ارزقنا فهم النبيين وحفظ السليم والملائكة المقربين. اللهم نسألك وأسرارنا بطاعته اللهم سلمنا وإياهم من آفات الدنيا عذاب الآخرة وبليتهما وفضيحتهما إنك على كل شيء قدير اللهم فبارك لنا في أعمالنا وبارك لنا في عمرنا وبارك لنا في كل شيء لنا برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار اللهم سلمنا وإياهم من آفات الدنيا وعذاب الآخرة وبلية وسلم سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you so much for Mr. Vice Dean, Bapak Abid. So then, our parents would like to say thanks again for all of the presenters, Professor Frans, Bu Dr. Ulya, and Bapak Dr. Haji Supaat M.Pd, for their informative and interesting talk. And to audience, thank you so much for your active participation and beneficial for everybody. Thank you for your attention. Good afternoon and Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam.
Bye-bye.
Ya, thank you Pak Franz.
Bye-bye.
Ya, Bu Zaim, terima kasih.
Semoga tadi bisa menginspirasi
sangat
dan bisa dipahami karena kadang terlalu cepat menyampaikannya beliau.
Iya, Bu. Ini Bu Zoom mau ngobrol ini kayaknya. Tidak Bu Zoom.
Bu Ulya, mohon maaf saya miss presentasi jenengan karena di sini masih sangat pagi sekali Bu Ulya.
Ulya, ini Bu Zaim. Siapa Bu Zaim?
Mohon maaf Bu Ulya. Kayaknya Bu Ulya tidak.
Oh ini sudah on Bu, sudah on.
Ya. Mohon maaf Bu Ulya, saya tadi tidak mengikuti presentasi jenengan karena masih sangat pagi. Iya.